Good evening, everyone. On behalf of the Calcutta Research Group, we welcome you to the webinar on work, insecurity, and marginalization. We have with us today in the panel Professor Manish Jha, who is professor at the School of Social Work in Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. Professor Jha will be speaking broadly on the theme of city as the site of gig work, emergent forms of insecurity, precarity, and spatial injustice. We also welcome Dr. Rajendran Narayanan, who is Associate Professor in the School of Arts and Sciences at Azim Premji University, Bangalore. He will be speaking broadly on the theme of from authentic to authentication, how corruption is being used as a fig leaf to abandon rural workers and disenfranchise migrant workers. We request Professor Byasdeb Dasgupta, who is Director of the Institute of Development Studies, Kolkata IDSK, and members of CRG, to chair today's session. And over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Shatabdi. So I think we can now begin the session. So it will be like this. First, Professor Manish Kumar Jha will speak for 30 minutes. And then it will be followed by Rajendran Narayan for another 30 minutes. After that, as discussion also, I will give my opinions on these two talks. And then the floor will be open for questions and discussions. So I now request Manish, Professor Manish Kumar Jha, to start his deliberation. Manish, over to you.
Emerging emerging as a kind of care worker in some cases, in terms of essential workers in some cases. So we have seen the exponential growth of people engaging in the gig work and gig economy. So what is actually is gig is something which we are aware of, but at the same time we know that it is being presented as something very lucrative, as like be your own boss, you are an independent contractor, you are partner, and therefore the work is presented as there is an element of autonomy, there is an element of freedom, there is an element of choice. What our experience in the field and engagement with the gig workers have said, that yes, in some cases there is an element of flexibility, there is some element of autonomy, but at the end of the day, enough data, enough observation, enough experiences we have to realize the kind of insecurity, informality, and complexity they experience with. We are aware that they are working in a system where the employer, in a way, is completely absent. So the app turns out to be an employer, aggregator turns out to be an employer, and the actual employer is there and not there, in the sense that it is the gig workers hardly ever or know or meet the employer. So there is no physical figure of the employer for these gig workers. Not only that, the gig work has been fragmented into so much discrete tasks and is made available to in a precarious, often poorly paid, task by task basis for the worker. Not meeting an employer, working in isolation, meeting or dealing with hazardous weather condition, whether extreme heat or heavy monsoon or many other things, further adds to their complexity. We know that their work is temporary, insecure, and poorly paid, mostly sporadic. It actually impacts their day-to-day life and circumstances. These gig workers, whether we look at a kind of cab drivers or the delivery workers and others, have a different layers and different kind of experiences of a particular way. The delivery workers, particularly, our study says that on an average, they are expected to deliver minimum 50 parcels in a day to earn 700 to 800. rupees the finally what they get at the end of the day, because it is each parcel is varying from 15 to 16 rupees which they get. Now we have also seen the kind of a continuous reduction in the amount which they get per service provisioning. So the precarity and insecurity is manifested because there is no regular time, no fixed place of work, and the same there is continuous discontinuity in their time and space. They for them the search for work is constant factor. We also realize that the structural, financial, and existential insecurity which is being produced by the neoliberalism is being manifested in the everyday life work situation of the gig workers. So what we also realize that the work day, how do we measure the work day of a gig workers? Invariably, our study tells us that by and large, most of them have 10 to 12 hours work day. And in the absence of, so in many of these things are also there is a normalization of casualization, and there is and they work as an intermittent or the contingent labor. So many a times, and apart from that, this continued exploitation is also based on we have had experiences. Some of us have followed the cases when we know that a particular Zomato worker coming from a particular religious community or coming from a particular caste community are denied, the customer denied to accept the food from the hands of those. So these experiences, apart from that, invariably in the urban housing societies, we are aware that they are forced to climb the stairs rather than using the elevators and lifts and other things. So, and sometimes it might occur to us that it might be one off or an exceptional situation, but that is not really the case. The more people we talk, the more we get experiences like that. So at one level, there is, in the absence of work opportunity, in the absence of livelihood opportunity, yes, gig work comes across as an opportunity, as something in which you can easily enroll. But at the same time, once you get there, you realize that what kind of expenses, what kind of investment you have to take. They mm, we know it very clearly that they everything, all physical assets which is being utilized in the gig work are being used, are being owned and self-provided by the workers themselves, because for the employer they are the partners, they are independent, and therefore if you don't own a vehicle, if you don't own a smartphone, you cannot be in this gig economy, and once you own, you have the responsibility of its upkeep. Many times these extra burden and the issues around it has created significant tension and problem for the workers. This opaqueness of the employer is very evident to is absolutely evident to all of us when we know that today Uber is the world's largest transport company without having a single vehicle owned by Uber. So they are listed as Uber Technologies. They do not have a vehicle, but they are the largest transportation company. Similar is the case of Airbnb, which is world's top 5 hotel brands, over 4 million listed worldwide, but has no accommodation property of their own. So what we actually realize and what we actually see that this economy and this sector works in a situation where the workers, the workers involved in digital economy experiences opaqueness, uh, absence of employer in a physical terms, and then subsequently being overwhelmingly governed by the surveillance technology. So the technology becomes the master, the technology becomes the governor. And that's where we realize that, and because of the fragmented nature, dispersed nature, isolated work, labor organizing is extremely low in gig economy. The ability to come together as an organizing force, and obviously it is far more lower if that segment of the gig workers are migrant workers. It actually then heightens their precarity and insecurity. In terms of income, in terms of what they earn, is also lots of speculation. A whole range of people will speculate that they might be earning a good amount of money. But the more you disaggregate and the more you realize that whether they own a vehicle, and if they own the vehicle, what is going on for what is being spent on EMI. if if they hire the vehicle from someone, then at the end of the day, how much money they keep and what goes to the owner of the vehicle. All these things basically tells us that they're the in the name of the digital mode of work and the digital interface of the work is something which is complicating the life and circumstances of the gig workers, particularly when the extent of, we all are aware that large overwhelming majority of Indian workforce are an informal sector and unorganized sector worker. But the nature and character of unorganized elements of informality is far more complicated in the case of the gig workers. So casual, they are mobilized, recruited, and trained. So at one level, their work is being mobilized, recruited, transient, but all of these are being done by digitally organized system. So this is a digitally organized informality. It is planned and organized informality where workers presented as partners or entrepreneurs, or no direct sense of principal employer, which we all know that the buck stops at principal employer if you go for litigation. But here, the principal employer becomes very, very elusive. So, hyper outsourcing through large scale subcontracting and fragmentation of work is the defining characteristic of the gig work and gig works, what we see. Now, the question comes is that then how does it work? And in how does it work? So, the platformization, which we say, are monitored, surveilled, organized through a sophisticated system of digitalization. So through the internet and smartphone phone enabled apps has consolidated, in fact, millions of dispersed providers, entrepreneur, self-employed. So the customer and the service provider interface happens in that some context. But to me, the most intriguing part is the element of you see the way through which algorithm work, because algorithm becomes the master, and algorithm is, as we know, is an innovative self functionality whereby it has tremendous amount of, they have access to tremendous amount of information, and and through that kind of information they instantaneously manage data, and through that management of data they take several decisions, often in favor of the employer, some mean in favor of customer, and the continuous objection which the gig workers have, that it is never ever in favor of the workers. So it's basically it through that large set of database with their advanced capabilities, what we see that algorithms are presented as objectively and mathematically correct instrument by in the business process, and that has the capacity to solve problems in an increasingly complex domains. So So what happens that these contingent workers, these platform workers, through these digital interface and the kind of sophisticated surveillance, their their life gets extremely. They are in a continuous surveillance situation. So what happens? The implication of it is not only their economic downturn, it also has huge mental and psychological uh, trauma and anxiety on them. So what it happens that while it says that uh, they have the options, they have the opportunity, they have the autonomy, they have the freedom, at the end which we realize that because of the losing out of on many things, they are always susceptible to more and more problems and more you can say reduction of their income, and at the same time many unique health and security issues. Of late, this 10 minutes, 5 minutes thing has become like that. You have to get your grocery in 10 minutes, you have to get your food in 15 minutes. And in the city, the sight of vendors, the sight of gig workers taking their life at risk so as to reach on time and so as to deliver at a particular point in at an appropriate time is quite common. The number of deaths, the number of accidents, all are quite common, what we all have seen, experienced, and getting news every day. So what it does is that this growing informalization and contractualization and casualization of labor had radically altered the world of labor. And it also the neoliberal dreams easily turn into the situations of precarity. And when I say that this continuous insecurity and precarity is a form of alienation where the workers loses their personal association with the labor they perform. The worker in platform economy are actually dispossessed, many times locationless in their working life. In There has been situation, many of you might be aware that in the domestic work arena, the newer actors are coming in as a gig workers. The domestic workers have been listed and enlisted. So from the experiences of access to washroom, to access to safe place to for resting till they get another order, and to very many things, our respondents have so many, while they are happy with the remuneration which they get right now, because it had just been started, and it also tried to replace the old system of domestic work through this gig work. So the on the face, for the purpose of remuneration, there is an element of happiness or satisfaction, you can say, but it is at the same time revolved around a whole range of other issues. In the city site and the different sites of the city, they have no place to sit, no place to rest, no place to go for washroom, and yet they need to be in the vicinity to get the next call, because they cannot go back to the faraway slums and faraway other places where they have their habitat. So basically, what we see that the digital labor platforms, which we say that act as a technological intermediaries to connect customer and service provider, and platform economy, which actually comprises market-based, invested by high impact capital, crowd-based network, and blurs the line between personal and professional. So basically, what it does is that it is changing the nature and character of work. It is changing the nature and character, or the sense of security and insecurity which the workers experience. So I would like to come to the point that apart from this, uh, we have received the statement from our respondents, we say that going to the bathroom could cost you your job. It has, we have heard about it that Swiggy customers or Zomato customers denied accepting food delivery, as I was saying, to the Muslim delivery executive or a Dalit delivery executive. And that, so apart from the nature and character of work, the nature and the social identity of religion, the social identity of the way the perception in the middle class have about certain community and certain group, all of these things are important markers of discrimination and exclusion for the gig economy worker. The most haunting problem for the gig workers is that action on their IDs, of something which is not necessarily and not necessarily their something which they have done, but if a continuous complaint goes or two or three bad feedback they get, their IDs get blocked, or they get a statement like pick up the order in 60 seconds to avoid action on your ID. A statement like this, and when they finally reach in the 60 second, they might be waiting there for 16 minutes before the food is being delivered by the restaurant to them, and the customers think that the delay is because of the workers. So all of these ultimately tells us that uh, the workers are in a continuous, multi-layered, precarious situation, and at the same time, they are completely confused about why they do not have any access to their own data. So while the data repository is in through the digitization is with the employer or with the app, they have no data protection, and that lack of data protection means a total lack of income, depending or agreeing to the terms that track their location, monitor their work, and even scrutinize every product used during and while booking and being delivered by them. So overall, the situation of their employment is, as it is algorithmically aggregated, individual, and they find it that it is an algorithmic inequality and exploitation in the name of autonomy and flexibility. Totally unpredictable earning, opaque rating system, and sudden deactivation. Uh, and they have said that a single bad review can undo the effect of 20 5-star ratings. So you can see that though they can have 25-star rating, one single bad review can undermine all of these. And therefore they often they say, in not necessarily in the same language, but they do talk about wage theft. So they say that through data intelligence, data maneuvering, data exploitation, data tweaking, there is a continuous wage theft by the employer. And this algorithmic opacity and information asymmetry lead to continuous exploitative gamification. And all of these things then result into a continuous anxiety, continuous tension, continuous frustration, and continuous risk of retaining their limited earning what they have. So overall, what I would like to reflect on that the deliberate obfuscation creates inefficiency and frustration, and this the task to task work with this data manipulation and smart digitalization is has made the worker at the receiving end and the employer and the, so it is a newer form of and a sophisticated form of capital manipulation and surplus generation. So it, and therefore the question of social security is, or anything which we say that the social question for the gig worker, or the social citizenship of the gig worker, or the social security of the gig workers are in complete limbo. And though certain specific states have come out with bills and acts and certain mechanism, but the trust or its efficacy is still being doubted, and there is lack of confidence in some of these efforts. So data as key, and what the workers say, that access not only to their data but also select aggregate platform data, so that this information asymmetry that they deal with, that they encountered with, that exploit them, can be leveraged, can be dealt with. So regular and independent audits as a way forward, I would like to say that in this segment, regular and independent audit of the platform algorithm, particularly to me, algorithm is the key. That platform algorithm probably make some fairness, bring some fairness to the task allocation and prevention of discrimination. It's also the robust labor laws, security, social security coverage, and a fair wage regulation probably can help in the platform economy risk in, taking and dealing with it. At the end, I would say that the digital parametric insurance policy and some of those things which is being tried, and some of the recent different states which has come out with registration, social security and welfare bill, probably that can be scaled up, that can be improvised, and probably that can bring some kind of security, some kind of you can say dignity to the work. And probably because we cannot say gig economy and gig work is going to continue, going to exist, going to expand. So then I would like to conclude by saying that in this situation, what would be the role of the government? What would be the role of mm, beyond employer-employee relationship, where the employer is invisible? Some of these things are way forward, which can be tried to have at least some social security and redistributive social policy. So with that, I would like to stop. Thank you.
Uh, uh, Thank you, Manish, for an excellent presentation on gig economy. Ranavida, we will take up the question at the end of the discussions of both Manish and Rajendran. Now I request Dr. Rajendran Narayan to start his deliberation. You have 30 minutes of time.
Thank you, Calcutta Research Group, for this opportunity, and thank you to Professor Manish Shah for actually laying the groundwork for what I have also been thinking about and have been working on, especially at this interface of labor and digitization. And I think that's it's very important for us to take early cognizance of this. Already we are late, but in the sense, but we still need to be cognizant about what this kind of digitization is going to play in terms of the changing terrain of relations between citizen and the state. So I think just today, incidentally, we wrote an article on the kind of struggles that Anganwadi workers are facing, because very recently the union government has mandated the use of facial recognition software for Anganwadi workers, to make sure that pregnant and lactating women in rural areas get take-home ration. Uh, for them to get take-home ration, they now, all these pregnant and lactating women in rural areas have to go through a facial recognition, through this facial recognition software that the Anganwadi workers have to be using this app on their phone called the Portion Tracker app. And unless the faces are authenticated through this FRS software, they will not be able to get take-home ration. So I think the how this is just to give the context as to how digitization is being used, and it's permeated across the landscape, across different welfare delivery mechanisms. Now, I'll start with one of the things that I've been very actively working on over the years is the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And I think that has a strong correlation with also the gig economy, because when there is, who are the gig workers finally? Who are the people who are we see as gig workers in most of the cities? They are all migrants, migrant workers from different parts of the country. And why is there migration in the first place? Obviously, because there's not enough employment opportunities for them in their respective homes. There is many of them are graduates, many of them have some kind of educational qualification beyond class 10, but because they don't have commensurate opportunities in their home state, home locations, they're migrating to the cities and working in the kind of precarious conditions that Professor Manish talked about. Now, I think just to give you a little bit of context in terms of what is the landscape of wages and workers in this country. So in 2019, before 2019, there was a committee set by the union government. It was called the Anupsapati Committee, whose job was to look at what should be the minimum floor wages in the country. And the committee came up with a recommendation that the minimum floor, it's not minimum wages. I want to distinguish between minimum wages and floor wages here. They said that floor wages are wages below which no one should be employing anyone. No worker should be earning less than the floor wages. And the number that they came up with was 375 rupees per day. This was in 2019. The committee made its recommendation, but the union government did not accept the recommendations made by the committee. Now, what we did was we did a simple exercise. We looked at the government's periodic labor force survey. This is a survey that the union government does by the Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. Now, the survey is being conducted on a quarterly basis. So what we did was we took the periodic labor force survey data from 2022-23 and just looked at the number of workers across the different employment categories who are earning less than this threshold wages. And what we found was that roughly and I must say that this survey is representative of nearly 49 crore workers in the country. So from a survey that is representative of 49 crore, we found that roughly 33 crore workers in the country are earning less than the floor wages that the Anup Satpathy committee recommended. And if you disaggregate it by the different categories of workers, and broadly, there are three categories of workers. There are regular wage salaried workers. What we found is that 50% of those who are regular wage salaried workers, as categorized by the periodic labor force survey, are earning less than this threshold. Roughly 60% of those categorized as self-employed workers are earning less than this 375 per day threshold. And roughly 90% of those who are categorized as daily wage casual workers are earning less than this threshold. And all this adds up to roughly 33 crore workers in the country. So this is the situation, or this is a macro situation of the wages and the workers in this wages and of what workers are earning vis-a-vis flow wages in the country. Now, this is the context in which we also need to understand the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. And this relates to the whole digital aspect that Professor Manish was talking about. Now, as perhaps most of you are aware, that the National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, or NREGA, is an act which guarantees 100 days of employment at minimum wages to every rural household in the country. Now, one of the things that has been plaguing this program for a long time now is that the allocations for this program have been abysmally low. And because of this abysmal low allocation, there were early calculations which said that roughly 1.6% of the GDP needs to be allocated for the program to run robustly. But what in reality has been happening is that roughly 0.29 to 0.3% of the GDP has been allocated for this program. Now, when the allocation is low, what the officials are resorting, again, heavy use of digitization, is that what officials on the ground are doing is that they are not even registering the demand for work by the workers. And this is done, and of course, there is a computer mediation there. So what happens is workers would go to the panchayat office or to the block office and say that I am demanding for so many days of work. In theory, this is how it's supposed to be done. And that demand has to be registered on the computer, and the workers will get a dated receipt saying that you demanded work on so and so day, and you're entitled to so many days of work that you're demanding. The Act provision, as per the Act, unless the demand is, if your demand is registered on the computer, and if work is not provided within 15 days of demanding for work, then every worker is eligible for a delay, eligible for an unemployment allowance, because it's a penalty that the government has to pay for not honoring its commitment of the Act. That's one. But if the allocation for the program is low, then the officials are not even registering your demand for work on the computer. If the if your demand for work is not even registered on the computer, then the question of providing unemployment allowance in the event that your work is not given to you within 15 days doesn't arise. So that's step number one of how suppression of demand, suppression of workers' rights are happening. And there is a digital interface. Now, another thing, another important safeguard in the program is that the payment of wages have to be done within 15 days of completion of work, failing which workers are entitled to a delay compensation. The delay compensation is just 0.05% of the wages earned per day. So these are important legal safeguards. Now, let's look at what the government has been doing in the name of mitigating corruption. First, they have introduced something called the National Mobile Monitoring System, which is an attendance app. Now, the way it works is every work site will have a geotagged location. Geotagged is which means that there are latitude and longitude measurements are given at every work site, and the attendance of the workers will have to be done on a smartphone by the supervisor, by the worksite supervisor, who's called a mate. Now that process has to happen within a specified radius of this geotagged work location. And unless your attendance, suppose you've crossed the first hurdle, that your demand is registered on the computer and your attendance sheet is generated by the computer, which is called a master roll. If you have surpassed these two digital obstacles, then you go to the work site. Then your third obstacle is now that the worksite supervisor has to be able to enter your photograph on this National Mobile Monitoring System app, or the NMMS app. Unless your photograph is entered on this app, you will not be able to get wages for the work done. And this has to be done twice a day, first in the morning and then after 4 hours. Now, typically, Narega work is it's called a piece rate work. So what that means is you go to a work site. Suppose there are 10 workers at a work site. Earlier, workers could go at their own time and do it. Now, there would be specific tasks that would be given to you. If you complete the task and go away, then you're fine. You don't need to come back to the work site. But right now, because of this app-based attendance system, if a worker has completed her work, she has to come back to the work site just so that her photograph is taken and that photograph is entered on the app. So if many times the work sites are maybe 3, 4, or 5 kilometers away from where you live, which means that even in blistering heat, and that's when Narega work is most required, because that's when other work options are very minimal at the beach. So what women workers have to do is they have to go to the work site, travel 4 to 5 kilometers in the heat, just so that their attendance is registered at the work site. So this is the third kind of digital hurdle that's getting created by that's being created by the government. Now, there are many instances, and the whole thing has been introduced on grounds that corruption has to be mitigated. There's no doubt in my head, and there is no doubt that corruption happens. But the way corruption happens is not necessarily because workers are not doing their work. So in this case, what's happening is that when the workers have to go back to just so that their attendance is registered in the app, many times what happens is the app does not function properly. Many times what happens is the network is patchy. Many times what happens is the software updates are happening at a centralized level, and local worksite supervisors who are called males, who are females, their smartphones are not compatible with the kind of software that's getting updated at the central level. Now, when these things happen, for no fault of the worksite supervisor also, the attendance of the workers don't get registered. And the workers would have worked for that period, for a period of 5 days, 6 days, but would not get their wages. So denial of wages when work has happened. So this is another digital hurdle that's been getting created. Now, ideally, what needs to be done is that the measurement work, your wages are based on the amount of work that you've done. And the amount of work that you've done should ideally be done by the technical engineer who's been appointed at the work site. But there's no monitoring of the technical engineer. Instead, you're monitoring the worker. So that's one digital hurdle that's creating a lot of problems on the ground. And this entire thing has been created to mitigate corruption. But instead, what we see is it is actually spawning new forms of corruption. Now, contractors in many places who are typically upper caste men would can game the system clearly, because how will, just think about it, how will a district collector sitting in the district headquarters be able to monitor a work site that's happening in a remote village in that district? So any 10 people can be congregating there, their photograph can be taken and uploaded, because all you see at the district level are numbers of, or are the number of workers who've been doing this work for a given muster roll of work. You're not knowing whether it's me who's working or it's someone else who's working. So that kind of monitoring cannot happen. It's not feasible. Consequently, this has created new forms of corruption where the contractor is coming in and getting 10 people to line up for this photograph, which can be uploaded easily on through a smartphone. So instead of mitigating corruption, we are seeing new forms of corruption. On the contrary, we are seeing people who've done the work, they are not getting their wages. So two different kinds of violations are happening because of this kind of an attendance act. Now, the second aspect, where one very important aspect, is the payment of wages to workers to be done within 15 days of completion of work. Now, here, what the center has done is the center has made the payment of wages to workers through the Aadhaar-based payment system as the mandatory, as the only mode of payment to workers. Now, earlier, there were two options available. One option was your standard, what is called the account-based system. Account-based system is, very simply stated, it's the way we transfer money to other people, which is we need your account number, we need your IFSC code, and we need the bank branch in which your money has to be paid. So this is the traditional account-based system. And this, if there is any problem in this, it could be rectified locally at the block level by the block computer operator. But now, the mandatory mode of payment is called the Aadhaar-based payment system, for which what we need are three things. One is that your job card, which is a mandatory document to get Narega work, that has to be linked with your Aadhaar number. Number two, your bank account has to be linked with your Aadhaar. And number three, which is the most complicated thing, is that the bank branch in which you have your Aadhaar and account number linked, that bank branch will have a software mapping done with the centralized system called the National Payments Corporation of India. Now, if all these three steps are done successfully, then the worker will get their wages on time. Now, failure in any of these steps implies that the worker will not get their wages, or the payment will get rejected. What often happens is that when there is a software linkage between the bank branch and the National Payments Corporation of India, if there is a software break that happens at that level, then the worker is denied wages. Now, earlier with the account-based system, as I said, the block computer operator was in a position to resolve that. But right now, through this entire centralized mode of payment, through the centralization, through this Aadhaar-based system, if there is a problem in either in the software linking between the bank branch and the centralized and National Payments Corporation of India, the worker will have no way to rectify that, because no one knows what needs to be done. And what has happened as a consequence of this, again, I would say digital deletion, is that because many officials on the ground did not know what to do if there is a spelling mismatch between your Aadhaar and your job card, they resorted to deleting workers from the job cards. And what we saw is that after this Aadhaar-based payment system has become mandatory, there was a spike. There was a 247% spike in the number of workers who got deleted from the Narega database. So the reinstation, the process of reinstating is not, although we worked with the ministry to come up with protocols in reinstating this, many officials are still grappling with the method, but the damage is done. Many workers who were alive, but they were digitally declared dead because of a mismatch between their name in Aadhaar and name in the job card. And there are cases that we've documented too, where people were alive, but they were declared dead and deleted. The other way in which this digitization has played a role in violation of workers' rights is that there was in the software system for deletion of workers, there was a what do you call that, a button which said, there was an option which said that the worker is unwilling to work and hence their job card is getting deleted. Now, unwilling to work cannot be a reason for your name to be deleted from the Narega database. And what we found in an analysis is that roughly 2/3 of all the workers whose names got deleted from the Narega database were deleted on the grounds that they were unwilling to work. Now, this happened primarily because the officials on the ground were not able to clearly choose a reason why the worker's job card had to be deleted. So again, this kind of digital mediation has resulted in en masse violation of workers' rights. To this effect, there was a 60-day dharna that many Narega workers across the country staged in Jantar Mantar in Delhi. But despite staging their protest, despite voicing their concerns around these, mainly this NMMS, the National Mobile Monitoring Attendance App, and the Aadhaar-based payment system, there has been stony silence from the union government in responding to the workers' rights. So again, the whole thing is in the name of corruption, digitization has been introduced to, but what the resultant has been violation of workers' rights. And this is what these are just preliminary steps. And the way I see it is that it's a larger design. The design is that through digitization, what you're doing is you're atomizing the workers, because earlier the workers there was an ability to collectively bargain. Now the collective bargaining ability is slowly getting decimated through this individualization and digitization process. And for example, I'll give you an example. There was this person I was with in Rajasthan. His name, I don't want to reveal his name for the sake of privacy, but let's call him Nathoba for now. He could not speak properly, and he was not able to withdraw his wages because his biometric thumbprints were changing over time. So when we went with him to the bank, it was an ICICI bank. The bank very casually tells him that आपको पैसा नहीं मिल रहा क्योंकि आपकी उंगलियां खराब हैं. Now imagine the dignity, imagine the kind of assault on the dignity that will have on a person saying that your fingers are ruined because of which I cannot pay. So this is the kind of language that's also we are seeing getting translated, and that's important for us to interrogate, because what we are seeing is we are seeing this language of labharti which is coming in, and labharti by definition means a beneficiary. And the moment you say someone is a beneficiary, like Professor Manish said, many gig workers are called partners. It's primarily a way for the employers to get away to give them workers' rights and to comply with worker legislations. In the same way, workers here are given the term beneficiary or labharti, which signifies that the state is not a provider of rights, but state is doing charity. So, and I think we need to move away. We need to really understand what it is doing, what these kind of digitization are doing to citizen-state relationship. And in on top of this, what the union government has done is they've now created a 60% cap on the funding, saying that no place can generate more than, if 60% of your budgets are spent the first half, you cannot spend more than 60% of the allocated budget in the first half of the financial. So this is again arbitrarily creating through a digital meme about about how a demand-driven program is now changed to a supply-driven program. And I think a couple of final comments is that we are moving from the authentic to authenticating, I would say, that we are relying on digital media, digital systems to decide who is authentic and who is not. And this fundamental shift from the authentic to authenticating is having a fundamental impact on the citizen-state relationship. And here, there is a very important book by this mathematician called Cathy O'Neill called Weapons of Math Destruction, where she talks about how algorithms are just opinions embedded in code. And that's what's happening. It's because if an algorithm is deciding which driver will go where and how much the driver will get paid, or if an algorithm is deciding which Narega worker's photograph will be accepted and which Narega worker's photograph will not be accepted, then it's just a question of how your political will is getting codified through a digital front end. So this is fundamentally at odds with what Babasaheb Ambedkar called constitutional morality, is in the sense that how institutions need to engage with citizens of the country. They have to demonstrate something called a constitutional morality. And what we see here are these are all instances and examples where constitutional morality is getting compromised. In the context of Narega, for example, all the digital interventions, they have what this scholar Rajesh Veeraraghavan calls three things. One, they're all top-down. They are all detail-oriented, meaning the tweaking happens at whether it's a software button or whether it's a drop-down menu. So it's detail-oriented. And number three, it's iterative, because the centralized nature of the software design is dictating, because they are doing constantly patching and changing the softwares. But the brunt of it is faced by a person on the ground, by the frontline workers and the Narega workers, as an example. So this kind of centralization of program implementation through digital media, it goes against the whole federal system of how the act should work. Because by design, we want to have better decentralization, ability to do local changes and things. But that autonomy of what can be done at a panchayat level, that autonomy of what a state can do, has been taken away through the centralized control. And I want to end this by using a quote from a novel that Kurt Vonnegut had written. This novel is called Clear Piano, and Kurt Vonnegut, an American novelist, had written this in it was published in 1952. And in the novel, Vonnegut imagines a society where human labor is completely displaced by machines. And it shows how high levels of automation can create an extremely polarized society, with engineers running the machine on the one side and the working class who are completely left at the mercy of these machines. And in the novel, there's a character called Finnerty, who's a brilliant engineer, who realizes how these kind of automations are resulting in dehumanization. And he remarks very sarcastically, with a wry humor, he says, and I quote, "If only it weren't for the people, the goddamned people, always getting tangled up in the machinery, the earth would be an engineer's paradise." And what we are seeing is that the working class is now reduced to a software engineer's paradise, where they are able to tweak and they are able to play around with which worker will do what. And I think what it does is we are pitting the authentic with the authenticated. We are pitting we are pitting dignity with dehumanization, and we are pitting fraternity with fracturing. And I think that's where I would like to end what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajendran. Before I open the floor for discussion, I should give my comments as a discussant on these two speeches. First, I start with Manish Jha, who talked about the gig work in the new urban economy. In fact, as he has aptly said, it is the gig work now is the fast expanding labor sector, so to say, in any new urban economy or even old urban economy. And this has replaced many of the traditional jobs or many of the traditional works done by some workers earlier, whether they are caregiver, whether they are transport uh, transport related with transport facilities or domestic work, whatever may be. Now, what has happened over the years, in the last 10 years, so that the digital labor and digital economy has become the integral part of the new urban economy. And in this kind of situation, what we find, what as Manish has said, that there is elements of precarity, element of exclusion, which is on the rise. In fact, the pandemic has shown that there is, or rather, the pandemic time has let us witness exponential growth of gig work because of pandemic related restrictions and etc. And even after the pandemic period, it is continuing. In fact, the space of gig work, the amount of work done by a gig worker, that has increased since pandemic days, thanks to the digitization of the economy or the digital economy. But this gig work is fragmented in many discrete tasks. And for example, a delivery worker, a gig worker who is basically a delivery worker, who is supposed to deliver 50 parcels per day, and for that he or she earns only 750 rupees per day maximum. And there is no regular time of work. Now the question is why there is so much rise in the gig work? Because now in the urban context, even in the rural context, there are now in economics what we call so many discouraged workers. That means the workers who are searching for jobs for a long time are not getting jobs. So in terminology of the modern economics, we call them discouraged workers. And one can see the exponential growth of gig workers in the urban economy particularly is due to this is associated rather positively with the increase in the number of discouraged workers, so to say. So these gig workers do not have any regular time of work, and every day they do search for work, which was not there earlier. For what do we mean by working class? In fact, we have to redefine the working class in the context of gig work. And most of them are working in a day for 10 to 12 hours and even beyond that to earn some living, and we do not know how they need a smartphone, they need a vehicle, uh, all these things. So, and these physical assets are self-owned or hired. If it is hired, that means he or she has to pay rent to the owner of this physical asset. So in that case, his net income is much low. But other way also, to maintain the vehicle and to maintain the smartphone, he or she has to make certain payments. So if we exclude those payments from its daily earning, then of course the net income of a gig work is minimally low. In fact, probably below the minimum wage that is existing as per government law. And one of the most pressing thing in this regard is that there is total absence of opportunity for any gig worker to move up to become upwardly mobile. There is no way he or she can be upwardly mobile. And they are all governed by surveillance technology. So there is lot of information asymmetry, and actually they are informal workers, but here the nature of informality is far more complex than the nature of informality associated with the erstwhile informal work in urban areas. They are digitally organized, so this informality is actually digitally organized, and there is huge mental or psychological trauma with most of them. And it is said that they have autonomy, they have freedom, all these things, but I think it is a paradox of freedom, as they do not enjoy, in a typical textbook sense of mainstream economics, no leisure hours. And sometimes their IDs may be blocked if the customers they are serving give a bad feedback, right? And this information asymmetry, as Manish said, actually working against the interest of the gig worker. And to use the Marxian term, these are the workers who may be performing surplus value or surplus labor or not. Sometimes they may be productive labor, sometimes they may not be unproductive labor in Marxian sense, but there is anyway a super duper exploitation, right? Now, since the inception of neoliberal age, the idea of labor market flexibility gained momentum. There are 4 different kinds of flexible labor regime. One is numerical flexibility, that is easy, hire and fire, which goes with this gig work. Then wage flexibility, that means you can push up the wage, you can pull down the wage whenever you feel it is desirable from the employer's point of view. And here the employer, as Manish has said, is invisible to the gig worker. Third is functional flexibility. That is, it is not, we have come across, we have rather transcended from the age of specialization to age of multi-skilling. So a laborer, whether a gig worker or informal worker, is supposed to do a multi-level task within a stipulated period of time. Otherwise, he or she is out of the market. So that way, and the fourth one of flexible labor regime is the temporal flexibility. That means when there is no demand for job, not much demand for worker, demand for labor. So the employer, who is the invisible employer here, can fire him. And when there is increase in the demand, then he will again employ him. So as far as I can see it, it is labor market flexibility in the context of gig work, which is at its extreme, where each and individual gig work, whether he or she associated with Uber, Zomato, or Swiggy, or Airbnb, or Big Basket, uh, or, or Spencer's, whatever it may be, there is a case of super duper exploitation. So, what should be the role of the state in this regard? Some state governments have started thinking about it. One of them is Karnataka, although it is not a very foolproof policy that the Karnataka government has taken regarding the gig work. But at the central government level, even after enacting the 4 labor codes, there is no talk, no mention about the gig work and gig workers in these 4 labor codes. So they are not covered. So no question of social security, no question of minimum wages that they should be given, no question of collective bargaining here does not arise, but because they are not organized, they cannot be organized the way the initial working class was organized by the trade unions, which is not possible here so far. So one has to think from the scratch how to protect the gig workers who are who are in a very precarious position, and after entering the labor market, they are, I think, further marginalized. And apart from the economic factors, Manish has spelled out certain other non-economic factors which adversely affect them. That is religious factor or caste factor, which is an issue in India. So this is what Manish said, and I have just added my way of thinking in terms of flexible labor regime and gig work. Rajendran has taken up for discussion the MG and NREGA, the 100 days work guarantee program, which is supposed to, when it was incepted in 2006 probably, uh, give the worker 100 days of guaranteed work in rural space, 100 days of guaranteed work in a year, and certain minimum wage was fixed at that time. But we all know since 2015 or 16, the budgetary allocation for this 100 days work guarantee program, which is the largest employment generating program in the world so far, is getting reduced every year in the budgetary allocation. That is number one. And we have to keep in mind that this particular program is a demand-based program. So those who want to work in the rural areas as unskilled workers, they have to first give their demand for work, And if within 15 days of time, as far as the MGR and NREGA Act goes, within 50 days they are not getting job, then certain amount of unemployment payment or dole has to be given to them. But these are all gone, as Rajendran has said. The most important part of Rajendran's discussion, deliberation is that in the rural economy also, as far as Monrega type of policy is concerned, the digitization of the implementation of this policy has actually marginalizing or leading to more precarity instead of helping the workers who have enrolled in this program. So yes, in fact, I should call it, now there is an app that Rajendran has talked about, and the exploitation that is going on is a new kind of corruption, which I term it as app-based exploitation. So here also, there is certain surveillance mechanism, and failure of it just in one point or one corner leads to non-payment of wage, if I am not wrong. And Rajendran has warned us that with Aadhaar-based payment system, the increase in precarity, the increase in non-payment has increased, and there is possibility of digital deletion of worker in spite of doing work. So digitization here, particularly the ABPS, that is Aadhaar-based payment system, has led to or has been leading to more marginalization of the worker in the rural area. And the situation which Rajendran has aptly termed as from authentic to authenticating, meaning that the entire system of digitization is about authenticating a kind of authentication of a worker who has performed a certain work, and there are enormous scope in this system itself, in this ABPS, that a worker, despite having work, may get digitally deleted and hence may not get the due payment, monetary payment as wage that he or she is supposed to receive. So both in the urban economy, as Manish has said, and in the case of rural economy of India, what Rajendran has said, the marginalization, the precarity, the vulnerability of this new working people. I am not using the term class here because they are heterogeneous, they are not homogeneous group of people, neither in this rural economy nor in the urban economy. They are actually becoming the victims of digitization of the economy, so to say. So with this, I end my comments. Now the floor is open for question and answer. So I request you to, all of you to put your question in the chat box so that we can attend one of these questions one by one. Now, first I go to uh, Ronobirda, who wanted to ask some question to Manish.
Byasdeb, can I ask?
Yes, yes, yes.
Manish, I was listening to you and I'm curious to know your answer and if Rajendran can also, offer his views. As I was listening to you, and I was reminded of the description of the Taylorist mode of production. Now, in the Taylorist mode of production, you have what you call the classic time and motion study. So, the designing of the machine and the productivity of the worker, and these were all then measured according to the capacity of the machine. But the machine was engineered, the machine was designed and devised and deployed in a way that approximated to the findings of the time and motion. And this was, let us say, at the heart of Fordism in those days. Now, my question is that a gig worker, let us say when the gig worker says or the company says that in 15 minutes you get the pizza, from wherever you order. Now, this 15 minutes is arrived through the result, a computational result of a series of what you call basically your algorithm, use of the algorithm through a series of the huge data, unsystematized, but this data can be then used to find out whether 15 minutes is the minimum or 20 minutes, that's the minimum time that you require, or 30 minutes that you require. So the number one question would be, is there, I understand the new features of gig economy. I also understand the new features of the agricultural rural employment program. But is it in any way or in what ways fundamentally different from the Taylorist mode? And in the Taylorist mode also you had the same problem of workers, except that ownership pattern and all that, those are different. So that is, but in the sphere of the production itself, how much difference is there, or can we say that it's not the discontinuity, but it's a continuity of the earlier thing? Linked to that is probably the more important question, which is that let us say the gig workers come back, and even though they are disconnected, but they are connected precisely through the platform, precisely through the notion of 15 minutes, the standard that has been set. And let us say that 60 out of 100 delivery workers say 15 minutes is impossible. So that then takes you to Marx, where Marx says that even all the factory norms, the 8-hour working day, if you think of his famous chapters in Capital, Volume 1, so where he was arguing that these machinic norms or these norms of producing, they are all determined by historical struggles between labor and capital, even though Marx was saying that capital has its own laws. And my understanding is that maybe even Rajendran's all the essence of what he is arguing, again, one can ask that the old labor employment program that the British had started from the late 19th century, the way they decided, can we say that today also such historical struggles, let us say, mounted by states, or I'm thinking not of NREG, but of the farmers struggled outside Delhi, where they were forcing a change in the rate of procurement. And the government was arguing that the rate of procurement was determined scientifically through all these means. So basically, whether again, my question is, these are exempt from histories of contests, or these are like the old Taylorist days or like the old colonial days of, in those days it was called test relief work and all that, whether they are a continuity with certain differences. Thank you.
Okay.
Should I attempt?
Yes, yes.
So one thing uh, I don't know how to establish something so clearly, but to me, when you talked about what in which form terrorism and this is different, to me is like in that mode of production, there was an identifiable entity with whom you are relating to, or a space which is here. It is the space become very fluid, the employer become invisible, and therefore, so yes, I agree that the time machine and those calculations has a continuity. So one is not saying that there is a lack of continuity, but the nature and character of employment has changed. Nature and character of visibility and invisibility of employer has changed. The nature and character of uh, risk pooling had changed. So that way, I feel that in that continuity, there is an element of discontinuity, and if not discontinuity, a difference, the way I say, or an extension in the neoliberal age we see. So this is my basic understanding of the phenomena which is happening. And also in terms of connected, and so the labor's connection is through app. It's their connection, and not that app is not a medium to connect among themselves. That app is instrumentalized to connect, to get job, to connect with customer, but not necessarily connected amongst themselves. So it actually restrict any connection amongst themselves or among the people of the similar kind of work and other things. So it is a connection with the customer which is being snapped with the algorithm in a particular way. So this is whatever I have understood. This is my take. But Rajendran can.
Rajendran,
No, I agree with Professor Jha. I think the biggest difference between the two is here you don't even know, you don't have a face to the entity you're dealing. And the face itself is outsourced. And the face is outsourced to a machine with whom there is only a one-way communication possible. So I think the potential of when the face itself is changing and you don't know who you're talking to. So obviously it's continuous, it's continuity, but a completely new form. And in fact, I would go to the extent of saying that it was one step before even capitalism, because in a way, what we are seeing is a digital mode of feudalism that's getting started in some of these systems. So I would say it's scarier than that in many ways.
okay, can I?
Sorry, just to add one quick point, I think one of the things is the potential that your ID, if you're a gig worker, the potential that your ID can be deleted. So you stop being a worker the moment someone somewhere decides to digitally delete you. So the fact that this power of digital deletion exists, whether it's gig work, whether it's Narega work, wherever any kind of mode where the mediation is digital, I think that completely overturns any potential of power symmetry, I would say. of power redistribution. Sorry, I'll stop.
Okay. Now I go to Amit Prakash. Amit has written in the chat box certain questions for Manish and one question for Rajendran. Should I read it out or Amit will ask them once again? Amit Prakash.
Yeah, thank you. I can ask them. I was writing down because of this Zoom bombing question here. I was thinking something comparable with at the Industrial Revolution stage, where primary accumulation was supposed to be a process in which you separate the producer from means of production and his labor. So all he has labor to sell, and that's the commodity. Now, if labor itself is no longer his ownership anymore under this app economy, what are we facing really? Is it primary accumulation? Worse? How do we think about that question? That is one question, one issue I wanted to raise. Then the second thing I was saying was in the past, I'm thinking Puliani here, double movement was a result of state-led regulation to save capital from itself, really, nothing more. That is not happening here. That does not seem to be the process here at all. What happened? What is happening here, and how do we make sense of what is happening here? The description is all very good, but that gives us the grounding. But how do we make sense of what is happening in terms of gig economy's relationship to new forms of capital today? That was the two questions I had for Manish. And Rajendran, I was simply pointing out, and I think you'll agree, capitalization is for corruption control is only the pretext. Computerization is a way of creating opacity, lack of transparency, really, under the label transparency, actually, interestingly and ironically, to be able to create discretion and impunity rather than participation and transparency. Thank you.
Okay, we will take the questions first, then the two speakers will respond to them. Next, I request Sucharita to raise her question once again. Sucharita, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you, Byasdeb. So basically, I was asking, I was reading this book by, I've quoted the author, Michael Fish, who talks about extreme capitalism in his chapter Operation Without Capacity, in a book which is called An Anthropology of the Machine. Here by extreme capitalism, he describes a lot of what you have been uh, telling us in this webinar, and he's talking about this in reference to how this disregards human well-being despite technological advancement. He's referring to the case of Japan, but also generally, and he talks about how, convenience has increased and an efficiency-driven economy has all these beneficiaries, but then it also has extreme disregard for human labor and so on and so forth. So I was just wondering, given this quote unquote ethical paradox between human and technology, invoking digital technology, of course, can we then ever think of a technology that is truly trustworthy if its inherent dynamism can be so easily used for exploitative purposes? Or is there a way of thinking about the element of trustworthiness of a technology or a smart digitized world, not in terms of its design, but the socio-economic system within which it operates? So this is to either, I was basically thinking of this question when I heard Manish sir saying, but this is to both of you, if you can reflect. And the second was more in generally in terms of thinking of, new forms of worker resistance or solidarities. Do you think these are also taking place in this precarious economy? So broadly, these questions. Thank you so much.
Sucharita, you are through?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Next, I request Madhubanti. Madhubanti, can you hear me? You have raised a question. Hello.
Yes, hello, sir. I was not being able to unmute myself.
Okay.
Am I
Please
audible
raise
now?
your question.
Yeah, I don't have a question exactly. It's a comment on Professor Jha's presentation. So basically, I was watching a video recently of a Zomato employee who was saying that the 10-minute delivery rule, it does not take into account the fact that most gated communities, like gated societies, housing societies, they require delivery personnel to register themselves when they enter as well as when they leave. So this itself takes up more than 5 minutes, obviously. And then, as Professor Jha said, that elevators are out of bounds to them most of the time. There are also caste-based like restrictions on who can use elevators and who cannot. Anyway, and so I was thinking about the challenges of delivering to modern urban high-rises, considering these restrictions. And since I'm working on housing right now, I was thinking of how even modern housing patterns become tools of oppression for gig workers, and not just the city, like not just traffic, not just just navigating through the city, but also modern housing patterns. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Just a
Now
comment.
Rajendran has to leave, so I request Rajendran first to respond to the questions raised to him.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a train to take, so I can be around till 7:55, and then I have to leave after that. So for this question, I think if Professor Manish responds, I can come to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So very quickly, to be honest, I really don't know whether I have answers to all these, but Professor Amit Pragash's question or observation, I see that I really do not know whether it is primary accumulation or a newer form of accumulation. The way everything is evolving, everything is changing. So it's the dynamic form of accumulation where there are completely certainly elements of primary accumulation, but over and above that, there are other layers of the accumulation which is unfolding itself, and that brings us back to Karl Polanyi when you say that this double movement or looking at it, basically the commodification or and the extraction is becoming more dynamic, more innovative, more complex through layers and layers in the fragmentation of work, the fragmentation of any scope of people coming together, and therefore competition for commodification. So there is a rush to commodify oneself, and once you commodify yourself, then you understand the risk associated with those kind of commodification. So that's the form of the processes, and that's the form it is taking. But probably we need to search for better explanation and better understanding that what is going to happen. What Sucharita was asking about technology and trust. We have been told since our childhood, साइंस के पॉजिटिव और नेगेटिव दोनों बताइए, टेक्नोलॉजी के पॉजिटिव एंड नेगेटिव दोनों बताइए. So at no point in time one is trying to say that the digitization, technology and other things are of no use. But like even in the capitalist mode where the technology was of a different nature or the advancement of technology was limited, even at that time the profit motive, so it is actually what is being, how technology is being utilized. So it is not the technology to be blamed, but technology is being utilized for surplus. Technology is and that extreme form of surplus resulting into inhuman treatment, exploitation, undermining socioeconomic condition, and under putting the precarious in a much more precarious and insecure situation. So I think we have to understand that the trust and technology and trust is a complex thing. Technology itself is not a problem, but too much of trust and too much of reliance and complete reliance on technology has, like, it is like anything. Too much of trust on a leader has a recipe for problem. So too much of a trust on anything. So I think then filtering and then understanding that is something one has to look at. And new forms of workers collective, it's not that it is not happening. So new forms of collectives are emerging, efforts are being tried out, even in the gig economy worker in different places. Its successes are limited, roadblocks are many, but efforts are on. And the last, because I know that. So Madhuvanti's observation, I would give a small anecdote in one of the papers which I have mentioned, that one delivery boy went to a scrapper, and then there was a dog bite, and because of the fear he jumped, he became injured, seriously injured. So the so-called employer or the app or the digital platform, rather than taking care of the seriously, gravely injured, got into this question that he was using IDs of his brother and it was not his original ID. And on the basis of that, nothing was given to him. So I stopped just by illustrating this, and it actually add and supplement what you were already saying. So,
Okay, Nasreen has raised her hand. Nasreen, please.
but I think Rajan.
No, I thought I'll just quickly respond to a couple of things before we continue. One is this question that Shucharita asked about whether we can trust. I think there are many examples, and I think there's a historian of technology called Melvin Kranzberg who said technology is neither good nor bad, nor is it neutral. So I think it's called Kranzberg's law. It's a set of truisms that he created. And there are very many examples where technology has been used positively also. So it's not as if it's entirely. In fact, I can give you many examples, but I'll just recall an anecdote from Palamu district in Jharkhand, where I was with this Adivasi woman, and she couldn't read and write. And I asked her that now the things are getting computerized. What do you think will happen to your rights? And she had a very interesting thing to say. She said that, look, it's I can't read or write. So earlier it was all on paper. Now it is all on computer. So for me, it doesn't matter whether it's on paper or on computer. What matters is who the person is who's dealing with the papers, who the person is who's dealing with the computers. So it's not a question of whether paper is good or computer is good. It's about whether the political will is there or political will is not there. I think that shapes our choices of technologies. It shapes how we engage with that as well. And in fact, I would say that there is one app that's getting created with through consultation process, which is actually very useful with a worker-centric report format and so on and so forth. So I think there are lots of possibilities with it. That's one. And I think going back to the comment that Amit Prakash had made, I think you are absolutely right. Whereas one thing is, I always think about it, and this also relates to the point made by someone on using Foucault as a lens as well. And I think that it comes very useful. One of the things I often think about when I'm in rural area is most people of the poorer sections of society do not wear spectacles. It's not that their eyesight is all perfect. It's just that they don't have access to it. And what we see is it's exactly an inversion. If you think of spectacles as a metaphor, transparency is when a government should be visible to the people and not people be visible to the government. But what we see is a complete inversion of transparency in whether it is digital mediation and gig work, whether it is Narega, pensions, or whatever, any scheme, any DBT, digital direct benefit transfer scheme that you can think of in the context of welfare. What we need over there is an accountability framework for all these kinds of digital mediation, and not just get rid of that, throw the baby with the bathwater.
Okay, thank you, Rajendran. And now, Nasreen, please raise your
Can you
question.
just quickly stay on, because some of the question that I had, you actually just answered it, Rajendran. In fact, I was just curious to know, when we see it as a binary, technology is bad, and hence a lot of things are, associated with this is bad. I mean, we're not talking about whether it's bad or good. Technology is here to stay. So let's say when, a radiology department in medical, AI is going to do everything pretty much, meaning you just need to upload a prescription and, your diagnostic would be right there. So somewhere I'm just curious in this discussion, and I think you kind of hinted at that towards the end when you were mentioning, is it just technology? Is it something that we are kind of asking the wrong question. Meaning, is it just about technology, or is it the interface, or is it just algorithm? I mean, there's no perfect answer, but somewhere I think the discussion needs to now incorporate that technology is not going anywhere. It's only becoming much more refined, much more fine in its own mechanism. And how does then, therefore, one just not necessarily grapple in terms question of trust, as Sucharita was saying, but little more than that. So is it state? For instance, I'm in some other place outside India, and where people are talking about technology being one of the mechanism wherein refugee claims are being, removed. So there are these kinds of aspects that we are talking about. So how does then, therefore, human beings grapple with it, and where does governmentality come in all of this? So it's a big, probably we won't have answers, but Rajendran, you kind of dwelled on that a bit. So if you could just elaborate a little more, and maybe Manish, you can just ponder about it a bit and just bring that aspect in, and to say whether we are indeed, looking the question in the wrong way. Thank you.
Okay. Now, Shyamolendu Da. Shyamolendu Mojumdar.
Well, it seems actually this is happening in America. What's really frightening, as it is, the precarity of the gig workers are well known. I mean, we cannot simply ignore it. It's a part of our most pathetic existential crisis. But actually, they're even being removed with the help of this particular technology, delivering goods through with the use of drone. That's happening in America. Second of all, when Rajendran was talking about the digital identity and the obstacles they have to overcome for getting that particular employment and its return. Well, if the government is so designing, it can use AI technology for depriving a person, a labor, from his dues. Is it possible? Is it a possible threat? AI is becoming a threat to our existence for time to come. That is all I can say.
Now, there are two persons, Shreya Manna and Panchali Nondi. One by one, you raised your question. First Shreya, then Panchali.
Just one thing, I have a train to catch, so I might not be able to stay on for
Yeah,
longer.
thank you, Rajendran. You
So,
can leave.
very, very sorry about this.
No,
I
it's
just,
okay. Okay. Already I have got the message that you have to leave to
yeah,
catch a train.
yeah. Thank you so much again, and
Thanks,
hope to see you, all of you.
thanks.
So, Shreya Manna and Panchali Nondi, can you hear me? There is no response from them. So, I now hand over. So thank you, Manish, and thank you, Rajendran, for your excellent deliberations. Now I hand over the thing to Shatabdi. Shatabdi.
Hello, sir. Actually, I was not able to unmute. May I continue with my question?
Yes, but very briefly.
Okay, okay. So my question is that the topic was related to that marginalization is not only like for the migrant workers, or like it is definitely extremely for them, but in also like private sectors, there are many private companies and sectors that there are no proper rules and regulations for the employees, and they faced, in spite of being proper qualifications and proper proficiencies in their own roles, there is a discrimination on basis of certain relevant factors. So, what can be like, how can it be dealt with? Like, definitely, like the migrant workers and those who are like, when the field executives say like they had to like in Domino's, they had to go within 30 minutes to cover the. That's a very risky thing. That's a really a huge risky thing, definitely. But also how to deal with this type of things in the private organizations right now. Thank you.
Manish,
Yeah. In fact, these are whatever the labor rules, regulations in normal general circumstances, at least that can be extended and can be assured at least minimalist approach towards some kind of protection, risk aversion, compensation can be looked at that. But the larger question of how informal worker or digitization or the gig workers are per in fact perpetuates the precarity in a particular manner is the larger and bigger question which we are deliberating. But to begin with, some kind of collectivization and association and some kind of pushing the boundary where they can be included in the larger scheme of the protection mechanism, social security mechanism, compensation mechanism, probably that can be of some help. And one larger question is about the society at large. Do we really need pizza in 30 minutes? I really don't know. Or do we really need a grocery in 10 minutes? That is a huge issue for the society to mull over. I think that's something which I would say. And the last point, what Nasreen had just said, that yes, it is who is instrumentalizing technology. It is ultimately the power, the dominant, the state, and the state instrumentalizes in the neoliberal regime, whereas they are facilitating market by allowing technology to behave in a particular manner, to do surveillance in a particular manner, to penalize in a particular manner. So I think that is something which we need to. The larger question is much more technology is going to stay, technology is going to become much more complicated. So we need to get into a much larger and complex issue around it.